So a few months ago, I heard the call. Not of nature, but of the open road. I needed to feel the wind in my hair and the asphalt beneath my feet. Beneath my tires? So I called up my dad and said, "Hey Pops, how about you drive me around for a day while I make a YouTube video?" To which he replied, "Please stop calling this number." After loading Dad's G-Wagon up with food, beverages, and enough film to sink the... I've already made that joke. Shit. Anyway, we headed up the old Dunstan Road and looked forward to the smooth, relaxing drive, which lasted about 5 minutes. From where the off-road portion, which would account for the next 80% of the journey, started. We stopped off at this bridge, and I took these photos. Okay, so it's time to address the elephant in the room. What film stocks did I shoot on this trip? Well, if you can't tell already from the colours that jump out and sucker punch you right in the I started off the day with some Ektar 100, which I kind of regret. Let me explain. So I really love the idea of Ektar, and I wanted to make this role work, because I feel like Ektar gets a bit of a hard time from a lot of people, saying that it's a bad film stock. So I get to thinking, it's autumn, all the trees are going to be orange and red and yellow. If you mix that in with some nice green pastures, you're going to have the perfect scene for Ektar to shine. What I didn't take into account, however, was that I was going to be shooting at midday with harsh light overhead as we drove through the driest, brown tussocked fields as far as the eye could see, with nary a tree in sight. So once we got into the portion of the trip with the autumn colours, my roll of Ektar was finished, just like my dreams of not being a f***ing moron. I also shot a roll of Ilford Ortho Plus, just for something a bit different, and finished the trip off with some Portra 800. The track went from rough to very rough and turned into a proper four-wheel drive track. Luckily, my dad is a professional race car driver and could totally beat up your dad. We drove about 80% of the way up this hill before pulling over to have a snack. I ran up the rest of the hill to see a god about a man. At the top, I took these photos because the view was quite nice. Although this photo is made entirely up of different shades of brown, it has a nice depth to it with the layers of hills fading off into the background. Would it have looked better if I'd shot it in black and white? Yeah. As we headed down the last of the off-road portion, we pulled over at this rock overlooking the valley and the river cutting through it. I finished off the last of my Ektar with what might be my favourite shots of the roll. We stopped off for lunch and a cheeky brewski at this field. I put the roll of Ilford Ortho Plus in my camera in direct sunlight like a fucking champ. Despite how good you believe your deductive reasoning to be, this isn't actually a film whose primary use is dental work. It is, however, an orthochromatic film. I hear you say? Let me break it down for you. There are two different types of black and white film. Orthochromatic film stocks like Ilford Ortho Plus, Rollei Ortho 25, and there's panchromatic film stocks like literally any other black and white film. So what's the difference? Orthochromatic films are older and more basic. Since the emulsion is more rudimentary, the spectral sensitivity doesn't extend into the red part of the spectrum, which is great if you want to handle it under a red light. However, if you don't, it'll simply mean that any reds in your image are going to be rendered darker. Panchromatic film is the hot new type of black and white film on the block, circa 1906. And thanks to the modern advancements in technology, the silver halides now have an extended sensitivity to include the entire visible spectrum. This means that your colors in your black and white image are going to be rendered more true to life. After lunch, we drove back down the road to this old shed and beehives, which I took a few pictures of. I also took a few pictures on my main digital squeeze, the Fuji X100F, just to show the color of the scene. We then drove down a few more back roads as the autumn golden hour sun was doing its thing, and I took these pictures, which might just be my favorite from the past wee while. I'm actually pretty impressed with Ilford Ortho 80. I was pleased with more or less the entire roll, which for me is a big achievement. It's a very fine grain film, and it's 80 ISO, so it's a bit slower to what I'm used to shooting, but I found that it rendered a lot of the scenes with a really beautiful texture. Even though it's not overly grainy, it still managed to have this quality about it, which I really liked. I would like to shoot it again, but I'm not sure what I would use it for, so it probably won't be anytime soon. There's something very relaxing about taking a drive down a rural back road with no real destination. Or maybe it's just the fact that breaks from this capitalist hellscape we call society are so few and far between that even the most mundane thing can feel like true peace. After some minor existential dread, I continue writing this script. We pulled up to Naseby, where I fired off the last of my Ilford Ortho and then threw a sweet roll of Portra 800 in my camera. We wandered up to the reservoir where I fired off a few shots, but the sun was well and truly going down, so they just turned out okay. We bid farewell to Naseby and headed towards the Kyburn diggings. Once again, we pulled over to the side of the road and I took these pictures. The hills around the other side that were now covered in shadow had a lot of character due to the sluicing that had occurred over the years during the gold rush, but that's another story for somebody else to tell you. One thing that would always interest me on these trips is the names of these tiny rural areas and tiny rural towns. I know that back in 18 whatever, when the settlers came over, there were a lot of Scottish settlers in this area, so you end up with a lot of places with Scottish names, places ending in burn. You got Paulburn, Wedderburn, Kyburn. But then there's those places like the area we're driving past on the way here called Moonlight. It just seems to be completely out of nowhere. No rhyme or reason, just a completely arbitrary name for an area. And that's what I love about these small rural place names. Why is it called Moonlight? I guess we'll never know.